My name is Joel Shyrack.
And my name is Jonathan Greasley, and we are the co-supervising sound editors on the Orville for King Soundworks.
So working on a show this magnitude with a ship set in space in the future is interesting. It's a little different from other kinds of shows, and I was the dialogue supervisor, and so the dialogue has to reflect the fact that you're in a futuristic environment. Everything has to represent what's in the image. So you can't have an accident off camera or whatever. That dialogue has to be separated from all those the real world hurdles that happen during production, and then cleaned up so they can be immersed in this futuristic environment. So that was the challenge of that show for dialogue.
And then as far as effects go, obviously it's very integral to the show, the sound effects. It is set, like Joel said, 400 years in the future on a spaceship. Everything has to have a sound, but everything also has to have a sound that sells not only visually with what you're looking at, but also is not necessarily a sound that you've heard before. The sound of the ship's engines is not technology that really exists. The doors are sliding doors, but they can't sound like they're mechanized in any way. Everything has to be very sleek and polished and high-tech. So every single thing has to be created kind of from scratch, and not only that, it has to be unique. And even though a lot of the thing we get into a lot of the times is we'll have different ships that are piloted by people from different races, but they're all kind of using the same technology in the universe that the show's set in, but they can't all sound the same, because if you've got two spaceships having a dogfight and they both sound the same, then you can't tell one ship from the other ship. So dramatically it helps to give things their own flavor. And then, same thing with the ship backgrounds. It's all got to be, the ship needs to have a presence, but because it can't sound articulated or mechanical or like it's running on diesel or anything like that, the risk you run is you can kind of just sounds like air conditioning all the time. So the challenge there was to try and make the ship sound interesting without making it sound intrusive. One of the things you'll notice is it actually progresses through the show as you watch it. New things will come up. There was an episode where we upgraded the technology on the ship. So I took that as a good opportunity to beef up the way the engine room sounds, because they're in there specifically, and then they hit a button and new technology comes into effect. And so I was like, all right, now we can kind of kick it up a notch and use that as a story reason to make things sound more interesting. So the ships and the weapons are very involved. Obviously, we'll get into sequences on the show with dogfights in space and 7 different types of ships all flying around each other and shooting at each other. And it's important to be able to get separation so that you can get a sense of what's happening and who's where and who the good guys are and who the bad guys are and who's firing at who. So even though thematically everybody's kind of using the same technology, because it's all these different races from these different planets have shared all their technology, so all the ships kind of run on the same engines and all the weapons fire the same types of projectiles, but you do need to be able to differentiate between them. So I do spend a lot of time trying to give each ship its own flavor and each weapon its own flavor. Like we were talking about earlier, a lot of this stuff has to sound very slick and high-tech, but that can only get you so far if you're really trying to sell the concept that these people are like screaming around, pulling these crazy U-turns and trying to outfly each other to win a battle. So we'll have kind of a toolkit for what the ships sound like, but then when you really get into the nitty-gritty of a dogfight, you're like, okay, well, this isn't going to cut it. We need more. We're going to hit this needs to hit harder. It needs to scream louder. It needs to, when it does the barrel roll, it needs a new sound. So as you get into the bigger action sequences, and there are a few really big action sequences in season 2.
In the dialogue preparation, when you're talking about different worlds, that a show like this, when it goes to other worlds, obviously they have to film this show in Los Angeles, California in 2019 or 2018. We had to do a lot of extra noise reduction and cleanup work to remove so nobody can pick out, oh, that sounds like 2018 Los Angeles, traffic sounds and things like this that are normal. Those things had to be pulled away from the production dialogue so that the sound design of whatever planet they're on can just sit there and there's no conflict there.
When we do have a comedic moment, the important thing is to stay out of the way of those things with sound effects, because you can get goofy quickly. And the show isn't a comedy. It's got lighthearted moments, it's got funny moments, but it's really not. It straddles a line between being humorous, being dramatic, being science fiction. And so on the times where we do have humor, we never want to kind of beat it over the head. So balancing that line between, action, adventure, drama, and comedy is a delicate balance.
The light moments in the show were almost always dialogue driven.
Right.
There wasn't like a spaceship shaped like a vacuum cleaner or something. It wasn't sight gags. And I think the idea of that is a lot of shows set in the future are always very serious in tone. And the refreshing thing about this show is that people can have permission to be funny, just like coworkers in any office scene. They can be very serious and very professional, and they can also be lighthearted. So almost all the humor was dialogue driven. So there wasn't too many opportunities where they leaned on us to provide a sound support to a humorous moment. It was just kind of dialogue driven.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is there's a whole thread that goes way back from season 1, and it kind of culminates in this 2-part episode in season 2, where the Kalon really, their full society is revealed and their true motivations are revealed, and then there's a conflict that arises from that. And their backstory is they're an artificial race of beings that were created by a biological race of beings, and then that had its own prior conflict that kind of sets up the current conflict between them and us in that sense. And so this race of creatures are completely biomechanical. They're essentially robots, but they have their own, each one of them has a personality. And so there's an episode where we go to their planet, and it has to sound like just weird and spooky, but you can't have birds or these creatures because everything there is these created, mechanized creatures. And so that had to sound completely unique in that sense. And then when they talk, their voices are processed a certain way to set them aside from everybody else. So that was a completely different set of challenges. Thanks for watching and listening to us talk about the sound of the Orville. John Greasley, the supervising sound designer.
This is Joel Shyrack. I'm the dialogue supervisor on the Orville. It's a really fun show to watch. It's different from anything you've ever seen that's about the future and spaceships. It's got something for everybody when you watch this show. You'll really enjoy it.